Elia's rook stood still at the edge of the reception hall, hands loosely folded in front of him, breathing slowly the way his training had taught him. The room was not large by galactic standards, but to a human it felt enormous. The ceiling curved upward like the inside of a shell, glowing with soft blue light that shifted as if it were alive. The air smelled clean, sharp, and faintly metallic. This was humanity's first formal diplomatic gathering beyond its home systems. Every step, every breath, every glance mattered. Across the hall, representatives from dozens of species gathered in loose clusters. Some floated, some walked. Some did not appear to move at all, yet somehow changed position when Elias looked away. Their forms were strange, beautiful, unsettling, and fascinating all at once. Elias had trained for years to control his reactions, to keep his face calm and neutral no matter what he saw. He thought he was doing well. Then Ambassador Vierks entered. Vierks of the Triune Continuum did not walk through the doorway. The doorway reshaped itself around them, widening and smoothing as if the space itself wished to be polite. Vierks's body was tall and symmetrical, composed of layered plates that reflected the light in slow ripples. Their limbs were long and graceful, but it was the lower portion of their form that made Elias pause, not because it was shocking, not because it was offensive, simply because it was unfamiliar. Elias' eyes lingered for half a second longer than intended. That half-second changed everything. Vierks noticed. They always noticed. Among the Triune, perception was a form of respect. Every glance carried meaning. Every pause was a statement. Vierks felt the humans' attention like a gentle pressure against their awareness, and they turned their heads slightly, focusing on Elias with all three of their forward-facing sensory nodes. The human was small, fragile-looking, soft, and yet interesting. Most species either stared openly or carefully avoided looking at the triune form below the torso. Both reactions were common, predictable. This human had done neither. He had looked, paused, and then looked away, not in shame, not in fear, but in consideration. That was new. Vierks moved closer, their steps silent against the polished floor. Conversations around them shifted and softened. Attention spread like a quiet wave. This was a moment, and everyone could feel it. Elias sensed movement and looked up. Vierks stood before him now, towering overhead but angled slightly forward in what their culture considered a neutral stance. "Human," Vierks said, their voice resonant and layered, translated smoothly by the device at Elias' ear. "You observed me in an unusual manner." Elias felt a small tightening in his chest. He had been expecting this. Still, expectation did not remove pressure. "I apologize if I caused offense," Elias said calmly. "That was not my intention." Vierks tilted their head. "You paused your gaze at the lower region of my form. This typically indicates confusion, curiosity, or challenge." Elias hesitated for a fraction of a second, then chose honesty. "I was unfamiliar with your physiology. I adjusted my focus." A murmur rippled through nearby delegates. Unfamiliarity was not usually admitted so openly. Vierks studied him. "Human, does the shape between my legs confuse you? Is that why you stare so oddly?" The question was not aggressive. It was direct, curious, almost academic. Elias felt the weight of the room press in. This was not just a personal exchange anymore. This was a test, whether the galaxy meant it to be or not. He met Vierks's gaze, steady and respectful. "No," Elias said. "It does not confuse me. It was simply new." "Newness often leads to confusion," Vierks replied. "For us," Elias said, "newness leads to learning." Silence followed. Vierks processed this. Among the triune, form defined function. One's body declared one's role from the moment of emergence. There was no learning what you were meant to be. You already were it. The idea that form could be observed without judgment, without assignment, felt empty. "Your kind does not assign meaning to physical structure?" Vierks asked. "We do," Elias said gently, "just not destiny." This answer created more disturbance than Elias realized. Across the hall, subtle signals passed between alien delegates. This was a dangerous idea. A species not bound by form was unpredictable. Vyerk straightened slightly. Explain. Elias nodded once. Among humans, bodies vary widely. Shape, size, structure. None of these decide our social role or intellectual capacity. A human with one form may become a leader, an engineer, an artist, or all three in a lifetime. Impossible, Vyerk said without hostility. It is normal for us, Elias replied. Vyerks felt something unfamiliar stir within their cognitive layers. Discomfort, fascination. The triune continuum had studied thousands of species. Patterns were reliable. Biology shaped culture. Form shaped thought. Humans broke that rule. Around them, the hall resumed a low hum of conversation, but many were listening closely. Elias could feel it now, the shift in attention. Humanity was no longer a background detail. It was becoming a question. Vyerks leaned closer again, lowering their voice. If your form does not define you, how do others of your kind know how to treat you? Elias smiled faintly. We talk to each other. This answer caused a brief pause in the translation system, as if even it needed time to adjust. Communication replaces biological certainty, Vyerks asked. Yes, Elias said. It is slower, messier, but it allows choice. Choice. The word carried weight. Vyerks straightened fully now, signaling the end of the private exchange, but their attention did not leave Elias. You are an unusual species, Vyerks said. Your presence will be noted. Elias inclined his head. That is why we came. Vyerks turned away, moving back toward their delegation. As they did, Elias felt the room exhale. Conversations resumed more fully now, but the tone had changed. Humans were being looked at differently, not as curiosities, as variables. Elias joined the rest of the human delegation near the far side of the hall. Ambassador Lin gave him a subtle look. What did you do? She asked quietly. I answered a question, Elias said. Lin sighed. The galaxy doesn't like answers that don't fit. Elias watched Vyerks from across the room. The triune ambassador stood perfectly still, yet Elias sensed intense internal activity. He wondered what thoughts moved behind that layered form. So did Vyerks. From their perspective, the human lingered in the mind like an unresolved equation. The human had not reacted with fear, desire, or challenge. He had reacted with thought. That alone set him apart. The triune continuum had catalogued species for millennia, each one predictable once understood, but humans did not present a clear category. Their bodies did not announce their purpose. Their eyes did not reveal submission or dominance. They observed. They adapted. Vyerks felt a quiet unease. If humans could look at form without assigning meaning, what else could they see that others could not? The summit continued, but the first true contact had already happened. Not with words on a treaty screen, not with formal speeches, but with a single moment of observation. A glance, a pause, and the realization that humanity did not see bodies as answers, only as beginnings. The summit did not slow after the exchange. If anything, it became sharper, more focused, like a mind that had noticed a problem and could not stop turning it over. Elias felt it as he walked through the hall. Eyes followed him, not hostile, not friendly, but measuring. He kept his posture relaxed, his pace unhurried. Humans had learned long ago that confidence did not need to be loud. The triune delegation had moved to a raised platform near the center. Vyerk stood among them, tall and still, their layered form reflecting the hall's light. To other species, Vyerks looked calm. Inside, they were anything but. The human's words replayed again and again. Newness leads to learning. Bodies do not decide destiny. We talk to each other. These were not slogans. Vyerks could tell. They were statements of how reality worked for humans. That made them more dangerous than lies. Among the triune, the lower structure of the body was not private. It was language. Shape, orientation, symmetry. These declared one's mental role before a word was spoken. There was comfort in that certainty. There was order. The human had looked at that structure and seen nothing that needed an answer. That was unsettling. Vierks shifted slightly, signaling a request for internal counsel. The triune around them connected through subtle biosignals, thoughts flowing in controlled patterns. The human does not read form, one counselor noted. Then how does it understand hierarchy? Another asked. It claims hierarchy is flexible. That is inefficient. Or adaptive. The word adaptive caused a ripple. Adaptation was prized, but always within limits defined by biology. A species that adapted without physical change challenged a basic assumption of galactic science. Vierks broke from the internal exchange. Their attention returned to the hall, to the humans. Elias stood with his delegation, speaking quietly. His movements were small, careful, respectful, yet there was no submission in him. Vierks made a decision. They descended from the platform and moved toward a side chamber reserved for informal diplomatic clarification. With a subtle signal, they requested the presence of the human observer diplomat. The request arrived at Elias' implant as a soft tone and a line of text. He read it once, then nodded. "I've been requested," he said to Ambassador Lin. She studied his face. "By who?" "The Triune Ambassador." Lin exhaled slowly. "Be careful." Elias smiled faintly. "I will be honest." "That's what worries me," she replied. The side chamber was quieter, its walls absorbing sound. The lighting adjusted automatically as Elias entered, shifting to a neutral white comfortable for both species. Vierks stood at the far end, alone. "You requested a continuation," Elias said. "Yes," Vierks replied. "Clarification is required." Elias took a seat as indicated by the room's guidance system. He waited. "You stated that human identity is not encoded in physical form," Vierks said. "Yet your species displays significant physical variation." "Yes." "Does this variation cause conflict?" Elias considered the question carefully. "Sometimes, but the conflict comes from ideas, not shapes." "Explain." "Humans disagree," Elias said simply. "About values, about goals, about meaning. Our bodies are not the cause, they are just what we happen to have while we argue." Vierks processed this. Disagreement among the triune was rare and tightly controlled. When it occurred, it was between individuals of the same biological role. Cross-role conflict was biologically impossible. "You choose disagreement," Vierks said. "We allow it," Elias replied. "It's uncomfortable, but it helps us grow." "Growth without physical change is statistically unstable," Vierks said. "Only if you assume the body is the only place change happens." Silence followed. The chamber's systems hummed softly, maintaining pressure and atmosphere. Vierks asked, "When you observed my form, what information did you seek?" Elias answered honestly. "Balance, mobility, where your center of mass might be, how you interact with your environment. Not status. No, not function. No, not reproductive signaling." Elias shook his head. "We don't assume those things." This was the core of it. Vierks felt it clearly now. Humans did not read bodies as answers. They read them as data, incomplete without context. "Then what tells you who holds authority?" Vierks asked. "Agreement," Elias said. "Or sometimes force, but agreement lasts longer." The translation system paused again, struggling with the layered meaning. "Your species allows authority to be questioned," Vierks said. "Yes." "Continuously." "Yes." "That creates instability." "It creates resilience," Elias replied. Vierks turned slightly, the triune equivalent of pacing. "A formless species cannot be easily predicted." "We predict each other all the time," Elias said. "We're just not always right." This answer lingered in the air. From a distant observation room, several other species listened. The conversation had been flagged by the summit's analysis systems as high cultural significance. No raised voices. No threats, yet probability models were shifting. A species that accepted uncertainty as normal was hard to plan around. Vierks returned their focus to Elias. When I asked you about the shape between my legs, you did not express discomfort. I didn't feel any, Elias said. Many species do. I know. Why do humans not? Elias thought for a long moment before speaking. Because we learned painfully that assuming meaning based on bodies leads to cruelty. Vierks absorbed this. Cruelty, exclusion, control, limiting what someone is allowed to become, Elias said. We still struggle with it. But we try to do better. This was not a boast, that was clear. It was an admission. Vierks felt something shift again, deeper this time. Among the triune, pain was physical and immediate. Cultural pain, inherited across generations, was an unfamiliar concept. You carry history in thought, not flesh, Vierks said. Yes. Then your kind is shaped by memory. Elias smiled softly. That's a good way to put it. The chamber lights dimmed slightly as the summit schedule advanced. Time was passing. One final question, Vierks said. If humans do not assign meaning to form, how do you see others? Elias met their gaze. As people first, everything else comes after. The word people had no direct equivalent in the triune language. The translator rendered it as thinking beings with moral consideration. It was close but not complete. Vierks inclined their upper body in a formal gesture of acknowledgement. Your responses will be recorded. I assumed they would be, Elias said. As Elias stood to leave, Vierks spoke again. The continuum will classify humanity as anomalous. Elias paused, then turned back. Is that bad? Vierks considered. It is inconvenient. Elias nodded. We've been called worse. He left the chamber, returning to the larger hall. The moment he rejoined the human delegation, Lynn leaned in. Well, she asked. Elias kept his voice low. They don't know what to do with us. Lynn's mouth tightened. That can be dangerous. It can also be useful, Elias said. Across the hall, Vierks watched the humans again. This time they did not focus on bodies at all. They watched interactions. Small gestures, shifts in attention, how humans adjusted themselves depending on who they spoke with. The triune had believed form was truth. Humans treated truth as something you approached, argued with, and sometimes changed. That night's cycle, as data from the summit flowed into galactic archives, a quiet update was added to humanity's profile. Cultural rigidity, low. Behavioral adaptability, extreme. Predictive confidence, insufficient. And beneath it, a note from Ambassador Vierks themselves. This species does not wear its meaning on its body. Caution advised. The third cycle of the summit began with quiet tension. Nothing dramatic had happened. No arguments, no raised voices, no threats. Yet the air felt heavier than before, as if everyone sensed that something important was shifting beneath the surface. Elias noticed it immediately. As he walked beside the human delegation, other species adjusted when he came near. Some changed posture. Some altered color patterns. Some increased distance, while others moved closer than before, studying him with careful interest. Humans were no longer invisible guests. They were being actively evaluated. Elias kept his expression calm. Inside, his mind worked steadily. This was the stage where misunderstandings either hardened into fear or softened into respect. Across the hall, Vierks observed the same changes from a different angle. The triune ambassador had spent the previous cycle reviewing recordings of human behavior. Not just the words, but the pauses between them, the shifts in tone, the way humans mirrored others without copying them. It was subtle but unmistakable. Humans adjusted themselves socially the way other species adjusted biologically. That realization unsettled the triune more than any earlier statement. A species that could change without changing its body was not bound by the same limits as others. It could enter unfamiliar environments and adapt faster than models predicted. It could survive errors that would break more rigid civilizations. Vierks focused on Elias again. The human spoke now with a delegate from a silicon-based species, his voice low, his gestures slow and deliberate. When he turned to speak with a gas-form envoy moments later, his posture shifted, his timing adjusted. Not mimicry, translation. He was not pretending to be like them. He was meeting them where they were. Vierks felt a strange sensation, something close to vulnerability. Among the triune, exposure was physical. You revealed yourself through form. Humans revealed themselves through attention. The summit moderator announced the beginning of open cultural exchange. Groups formed naturally, without strict structure. This phase often revealed more than formal talks ever could. Elias found himself approached by an envoy from a long-established galactic power. The being's form was tall and angular, with sharp edges that caught the light. "You are human," the envoy stated. "Yes," Elias replied. "You were observed questioning biological determinism." "I was answering questions," Elias said gently. The envoy tilted its head. "Your answers have caused instability in several cultural models." Elias nodded. "I'm sorry for the discomfort." The envoy studied him closely. "You do not appear sorry." "I'm not sorry that we exist as we are," Elias said, "only that the universe is larger than expected." That answer spread quickly. Nearby, other delegates listened, some with concern, some with curiosity, a few with something like relief. One species, long classified as biologically limited, moved closer. Their body was small, compact, designed for repetitive labor. They spoke softly. "If form does not define purpose," the being asked, "can a role be changed?" Elias met their gaze. "Yes, not easily. Not without resistance, but yes." The being's surface patterns flickered in a way that indicated emotional overload. They stepped back without another word. Vierk saw this interaction and felt the weight of it. Humans were not just an anomaly, they were a disruption. Not through force, through possibility. That made them dangerous in a way the galaxy was not prepared for. Later, Vierks requested another observation session, this time not private. They positioned themselves at a junction where multiple conversations crossed. They watched how humans navigated complexity. A pattern emerged. Humans did not rely on fixed rules. They relied on reading intent. They watched reactions, adjusted phrasing, softened or sharpened meaning as needed. They treated communication as a living process, not a transmission of static data. Most species spoke to declare. Humans spoke to discover. One of the triune analysts transmitted a quiet note to Vierks. "If humans can do this across cultures," it read, "they may mediate conflicts we cannot." Vierks considered that. Mediation required understanding without ownership. It required flexibility without loss of identity. Humans seemed built for that, not in flesh, but in mind. The thought disturbed and impressed them at the same time. Elias felt the attention increasing. A few cycles ago, he would have been nervous. Now he felt something else. Responsibility. Every word mattered more now. Humanity was no longer just representing itself. It was becoming an example. A younger human delegate approached him quietly. "Sir, several envoys are requesting informal dialogue." Elias nodded. "Let's not keep them waiting." They gathered in a loose circle. No central authority, no formal order, just conversation. Questions came quickly. How do humans maintain unity without fixed roles? Some listeners found these answers disturbing. Others found them comforting. One envoy asked, "Do humans ever wish for simpler certainty?" Elias paused. "Sometimes, especially when things hurt, but certainty can become a cage." That line spread through the summit like a quiet signal. Vierks felt something shift inside the triune network. Several internal voices reacted strongly. A cage was a powerful metaphor. For a species whose bodies defined their paths, the idea struck close. The summit's analysis systems updated again. Human influence increasing, cultural contagion risk moderate, psychological impact high. Vierks made another decision. They approached the human circle openly. The conversation slowed, attention focused. "Human Elias," Vierk said. "Your presence has altered the flow of this summit." Elias inclined his head. "That was not my goal." "Intent does not negate effect," Vierks replied. "I understand," Elias said. Vierks looked around the group. "Your species does not dominate through strength." "No," Elias agreed. "You do not dominate through numbers. No, you dominate through interpretation." The word dominate caused a ripple of reaction among humans. Elias raised a hand slightly, signaling calm. "We don't seek to dominate," Elias said. "We seek to understand." "Understanding changes systems," Vierk said, "sometimes without consent." "That's true," Elias said quietly. "That's why we try to listen as much as we speak." The Triune ambassador studied him for a long moment. Then they spoke a sentence that would later be cited in dozens of academic archives. "Your kind is not dangerous because you are aggressive," Vierk said. "You are dangerous because you are adaptable." Elias did not deny it. "We've had to be," he said. "Our world changed often. Sometimes violently, sometimes slowly. We survived by learning faster than our environment could break us." Vierks processed that. Survival through learning, not through physical superiority. A species shaped by change rather than resisting it. The session ended shortly after. Delegates dispersed, but the tension did not fade. It transformed. That rest cycle, Vierks reviewed another set of human recordings. This time not from the summit but from historical archives voluntarily shared by humanity. Struggles, conflicts, failures, recoveries. Humans had hurt themselves deeply in the past. They had also questioned themselves relentlessly. Vierks realized something then. Humans were not fearless. They were experienced. They had stared into uncertainty for so long that it no longer paralyzed them. By the next cycle, rumors had spread. Some species spoke of humans with suspicion. Others spoke of them with hope. A few spoke of them with quiet fear. Elias stood at the observation window, looking out at the stars beyond the station. They were distant, cold, indifferent. Behind him, Ambassador Lin spoke softly. "You've changed the room." "We all did," Elias said. Lin folded her arms. "Do you think they'll accept us?" Elias thought of Vierks, of the questions, of the silence that followed honest answers. "I don't know," he said. "But they can't ignore us anymore." Across the station, Vierks reached a conclusion and recorded it under personal authority. Humans do not carry their purpose in their bodies. They carry it in their choices. And any civilization that can choose what it becomes. Vierks stood alone in a private reflection chamber, a space reserved for triune ambassadors when their internal balance required recalibration. The walls responded to thought patterns, shifting color and texture to stabilize emotional flow. Normally, this chamber brought clarity. This time it did not. The human words returned again and again, not as sound but as structure. Bodies do not decide destiny. We talk to each other. Understanding changes systems. For the first time in their long service, Vierks felt unsure of their own form. Among the triune, such uncertainty was rare. Identity was clear. Purpose was visible. From the moment of emergence, a triune knew what they were meant to be. There was comfort in that. There was peace. But now that peace felt thin. Vierks examined their lower structure, the very shape that had sparked the first question. It had always been a statement, a declaration. Others saw it and understood Vierks's role without confusion. The human had seen it and simply noted it. No judgment, no assumption. No reduction. That absence now echoed loudly. Vierks accessed restricted historical records, something they had not done in many cycles. They searched for moments when triune society had questioned its own foundations. There were few. One entry stood out. An ancient philosophical anomaly, dismissed as inefficient and quietly removed from cultural memory. The fragment spoke of unlived possibilities. At the time, it had been considered dangerous. Now it felt familiar. Across the station, Elias felt a different kind of weight. Humans had been invited into several high-level discussions, not as observers but as perspectives. Elias understood the meaning of that shift. The galaxy was testing them, not for strength, for influence. He moved carefully, choosing words with precision. Humanity did not need to prove superiority. It only needed to avoid becoming misunderstood as a threat. During a smaller gathering, an envoy from a rigid caste-based species spoke openly. "Your presence is destabilizing," the envoy said, not unkindly. Elias nodded. "Change often is. Our civilization relies on certainty," the envoy continued. "Your ideas weaken that certainty." Elias replied calmly. "Certainty can be useful, but when it prevents growth, it becomes fragile." The envoy considered this. "You speak as if fragility is dangerous." "It is," Elias said, "especially when reality changes." That conversation ended without resolution but without hostility. Elias sensed something important had happened. Seeds were being planted. Not all would grow. Some would cause resistance. That was unavoidable. Later, Vierks requested a private meeting again. This time the tone of the request felt different, less formal, more personal. Elias accepted. The chamber was dimmer than before. Vierks stood near the center, their posture subtly altered. To a triune it was barely noticeable. To a careful observer it suggested inner conflict. "You requested dialogue," Elias said. "Yes," Vierks replied. "Not clarification, reflection." Elias waited. "You have caused disruption," Vierks said. "Not through intent but through example." "I understand," Elias said. "Do you?" Vierks asked. "Your species can choose its path. Mine cannot, not without unraveling itself." Elias felt a quiet sadness at that. "Every choice has a cost," he said, "including the choice not to choose." Vierks's sensory nodes dimmed slightly, a sign of deep processing. "Among the triune, purpose is stability. Stability is survival." "And has that been true?" Elias asked gently. "Yes," Vierks said. "For a long time." "Then it served you well," Elias said, "but the universe is larger now." Vierks looked at him. "Your kind assumes change is inevitable." "We learned that the hard way," Elias said. "Our planet changed. Our societies changed. Sometimes we resisted and broke. Sometimes we adapted and survived." "You speak of suffering," Vierks said. "Yes," Elias replied. "We don't hide it, we learn from it." Vierks felt something tighten within their internal network. The triune did not value suffering as a teacher. Pain was corrected, not remembered. But humans carried pain forward not as a wound but as information. "That seems inefficient," Vierks said. "It is," Elias agreed. "But it makes us careful." Silence followed, not awkward, thoughtful. Vierks spoke again. "When you look at my form now, what do you see?" Elias answered without hesitation. "A being who carries responsibility, someone thoughtful, someone questioning." "Nothing more." "A lot more," Elias said, "but nothing that your body tells me." The chamber's walls shifted slightly, responding to Vierks's emotional imbalance. "For the first time," Vierks said slowly, "I am aware of paths I cannot take." Elias did not rush to fill the space. "That awareness can hurt," he said, "but it can also free you." "How?" Vierks asked. "By reminding you that what you are is not all you could imagine," Elias said. "Even if you never change, knowing that matters." This was dangerous territory. Vierks knew it. The triune system was not built to handle existential uncertainty. Yet the thought did not feel like collapse. It felt like expansion. After the meeting, Vierks did something unprecedented. They altered their official recommendation draft. Instead of labeling humanity as a destabilizing anomaly, they proposed a new classification. Formless civilization. Not chaotic, not superior, formless. A species whose identity was not fixed by biology but shaped by continuous choice. The proposal caused immediate internal debate within the triune continuum. Some voices resisted strongly. Others hesitated. A few, quietly, agreed. Meanwhile, Elias noticed a shift in how other species interacted with humans. Some avoided them, fearing disruption. Others approached them carefully, asking questions they had never voiced before. One small envoy said quietly, "If we questioned our roles, our society might break." Elias answered honestly, "It might, or it might grow. There's no safe answer." The envoy nodded slowly. "You live with that uncertainty every day." "Yes," Elias said. "How do you endure it?" Elias smiled. "We don't endure it, we share it." That idea spread faster than any formal statement. By the end of the cycle, the summit felt different, less rigid, more cautious, more alive. Vyerk stood once more at the observation window, looking out into space. The stars were unchanged, cold, indifferent, but the way they were seen had shifted. For the first time, Vyerks wondered not what they were, but who they were, separate from form. It was not a comfortable thought, but it was not unbearable. And somewhere in the station, humanity continued doing what it had always done best. Not conquering, not commanding, but quietly reminding the universe that identity did not have to be a cage. The final cycle of the summit arrived without announcement. No alarms sounded. No banners changed. Yet everyone felt it. Decisions that had been slowly forming now pressed toward conclusion. Conversations carried more weight. Pauses lasted longer. Elias stood with the human delegation one last time in the central hall. The space felt familiar now, almost calm. He remembered how overwhelming it had felt on the first day, how foreign everything had been. That feeling was gone. Now the uncertainty belonged to the galaxy. Across the hall, Vyerks prepared to speak before the assembled delegates. This was rare. The Triune preferred collective statements, carefully filtered and refined. A single ambassador addressing the summit directly meant something significant was about to happen. Vyerks's posture was steady, but inside, their thoughts moved in complex patterns. The proposal they carried would not be easy to accept. It challenged ancient assumptions. It invited questions the galaxy was not used to asking, but it was necessary. The moderator signaled for attention. The hall quieted. "Delegates," the moderator announced, "Ambassador Vyerks of the Triune Continuum has requested the floor." Vyerks stepped forward. Light reflected softly off their layered form. They did not rush. "For many cycles," Vyerks began, "the galaxy has classified civilizations by structure, function, and biological certainty. This system has provided stability." A few delegates signaled agreement. "However," Vyerks continued, "recent observations have revealed a category we did not account for." The pause was deliberate. "A civilization whose identity is not defined by physical form." Murmurs spread. "Humanity," Vyerks said. Elias felt Lin shift beside him, but he remained still. "The human species does not assign destiny through biology," Vyerks said. "Their bodies do not declare purpose. Their social roles are not fixed. Their authority is questioned. Their systems adapt continuously." Some delegates reacted with discomfort. Others leaned in. "This does not make them chaotic," Vyerks said. "It makes them resilient." Silence followed. "We propose a new classification," Vyerks said. "Humanity shall be recognized as a formless civilization." The term echoed through the hall. "Formless does not mean without structure," Vyerks clarified. "It means without biological constraint. Their defining trait is choice." That word again. Choice. Vyerks turned slightly, allowing their gaze to pass over the delegates. "Such a civilization cannot be predicted using existing models. This presents risk." Several species signaled approval of that assessment. "But it also presents opportunity," Vyerks said. "Humans have demonstrated the ability to interpret, translate, and adapt across cultural boundaries without loss of identity. They do not replace systems. They interact with them." Vyerks paused, then added, "They do not conquer through force. They influence through understanding." The hall remained quiet. This was not a declaration of dominance. It was something more unsettling, A delegate from a powerful alliance spoke. What safeguards exist against cultural destabilization? Vierks answered honestly. None absolute, as with any meaningful exchange. Another delegate asked, what if their influence erodes necessary order? Then order must be examined, Vierks replied, not blindly defended. That answer caused a ripple. Finally, the moderator turned toward the human delegation. Does humanity wish to respond? All eyes moved to Elias. He stepped forward slowly. We did not come to change anyone, Elias said. His voice was calm, steady. We came to listen, to learn, to cooperate. He looked around the hall. We know we are difficult to categorize, we always have been. A few delegates reacted with faint amusement. We don't have perfect systems, Elias continued. We argue, we fail. We hurt each other, but we also adapt. We revise, we try again. He met Vierks's gaze briefly with quiet respect. We don't believe identity should be a prison, Elias said. Not for us, not for anyone, but we also know that change must be chosen, not forced. He took a breath. If our presence causes questions, we hope they lead to understanding, not fear. He stepped back. The hall remained silent for a long moment. Then the moderator spoke. The proposal will be recorded and accepted provisionally. It was not full approval, but it was enough. Elias felt a weight lift from his chest. Humanity had not been rejected. It had not been absorbed. It had been acknowledged. After the session, delegates dispersed more slowly than usual. Conversations were quieter, more thoughtful. Some species avoided humans entirely. Others approached them with new curiosity. One envoy said softly to Elias, "Your kind frightens us." Elias nodded. "We frighten ourselves sometimes." Another said, "You make us wonder who we could have been." Elias answered gently, "Wondering doesn't mean changing." Across the hall, Vierk stood alone again, watching the humans prepare to depart. They felt no regret. For the first time in their service, they had acted not just as a representative of continuity, but as a witness to possibility. Later, as the station entered rest cycle, Vierks recorded a final personal note. The galaxy believed identity was written in form. Humans proved it could be written in choice. They are not superior. They are not harmless. They are undefined. And that is why they must be respected. Elias stood at the observation window one last time before departure. Stars stretched endlessly ahead, unknown, unshaped. Lynn joined him. "Do you think we did enough?" Elias watched the distant light. "We did what we could." "Is that enough?" she asked. He smiled slightly. "For now." As the human vessel undocked, the station lights reflected off its hull, small and unremarkable among greater ships, yet many eyes followed it. The galaxy would continue as it always had, slowly, carefully. But something had changed. There was now a species among them that did not arrive with answers written in its body, only questions, and the quiet, unsettling truth that the future did not have to take a single shape.